You're listening to the Restoration Podcast, conversations of hope and healing. Join us as we talk about subjects dealing with ministry, faith, everyday life, and other hot topics. Our prayer is that these conversations bring encouragement to your life. All right, well, Tim, welcome. Thanks for agreeing to do this. Sorry it took so long to get a date. You're a farmer, correct?
Yeah.
And so this is kind of peak season, right?
Yeah, kind of getting to the tail end of that for season. Summer, late July, early August is about my slowest time. But.
Okay. So this world of farming is actually new to me because I grew up in the city. And so Pastor Johnny actually told me, he said, you better get used to farmers and farming people because that's very important in Iowa. And actually not just in Iowa, but for the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And so thanks for what you do, you know. And Pastor Johnny also frequently uses farmers as examples in his sermons and stuff because it takes a lot of faith to do what y'all do. And recently it's been pretty testing y'all's faith with less rain. Is that correct? Has it rained not as often the past few years?
Well, the last couple of years have been really dry, but then now here the last month, it's been overly wet.
And that's
which is a struggle too.
A different struggle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We're never happy. It's either too dry or too wet, or
there's no perfect.
Yeah, there's no perfect. So
then I also didn't realize that the winter also affects your season, correct?
Because I'm a cattle feeder. Okay. I got cow calf, and I feed them out to slaughter, and so I'm a little different than a lot of what people picture. Farmers are just crop farmers.
Sure.
So my schedule is based on keeping the animals all fed and healthy and surviving and whatever. So wintertime's actually almost a tougher season for me than even the spring planting season that everybody thinks about farmers.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot. I never thought of that. It never was put into perspective until I moved here. Although before I was here, I taught band in a small Missouri town, and a lot of those kids, they were farmers too, but if I remember correctly, a lot of those kids, I think those were dairy farmers and stuff like that. And so it was, again, different but similar, but not until here. We have a lot of congregation members that are farmers, correct? Or somewhat involved in that. So
it was amazing when I started coming up here. I grew up in Mapleton, a small town, and still live there. Going to church, it was all small town stuff. And you get up here, and I was amazed how many farmers were driving into Sioux City to go to church here. And so
that's pretty cool.
I didn't feel as isolated as I thought I was gonna come into the city to go to church.
Yeah, a lot of commuters, and I'm thankful for farmers, really am. But Tim, you have been attending Restoration Church, or it was Morningside before. How long have you been attending our church?
I think about 24 years.
Okay. And you're currently on the board, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And that's something that you've done before, right?
Yep.
So for those who don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, our church has a board. Lots of churches do. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but board members serve for how long are the terms?
3 years.
3 years. And can you serve consecutive terms? Yes or no?
No, you got to take a year off in between.
That's what I thought. So board members serve for 3 years, and then they take a year off, and they can be voted in again, correct?
Yep.
So how many times have you served on our board?
This is my third term
Yeah.
of being on the board.
Yeah. And I actually have a really distinct memory of you, a very early memory. It's a good one, don't worry. But I remember when me and Tori first moved here in August of 21, and we were in search of a home. We lived with Pastor Johnny for like 3 months.
Yep.
And I remember when we closed on our home, and I believe he may have shared that in a board meeting, that good news or something. And I have to say, from what I remember, you were the first person outside of the family that approached me. Even before I got in the building, we were in the church parking lot, and you walked towards me, and your exact words were, "Hooray, hooray, you got a house."
Yeah.
So you were the first one to congratulate us, and I never forgot that. So thank you for that.
Well, and I being Tori and my daughter Danica were like a year apart, and we're in youth together and whatever. So I mean, I kind of feel close to you guys just because friends with Johnny and Angie and Tori and Danica, and I knew what an exciting time that would be. And, it, you know, I'm sure it was good, but yet it had to be tough living with your in-laws. And
sure, let's get into that. No, no, we were very thankful, but it was kind of, you understand, it takes, space is healthy and necessary. And I mean, we're very thankful. We literally would have been homeless if it weren't for them.
Yeah.
But it was an exciting day, and I'll never forget that. That's stuck in my brain forever. But you serve on the church board. Did you ever serve in any other ministry areas? I know you were like a red carpet person, correct?
Yeah, I'm still red carpet.
That, right?
I'm in charge of the second service ushering. I've done many things around the church, and maybe not officially or whatever, but another big ministry I've done a lot of is missions trips.
Oh, yeah.
Our summer, it was originally MAPS is what it was called.
Yep, I remember that.
And I forget what they changed the name of it to now, but it was basically a summer in the United States construction missions, and we started out as being the church that would be the sheetrockers when they were building new churches on Indian reservations. So that was my first missions experience when we started coming to church here. I think it was in 2000 was the first one I went on, and we went out to Poplar, Montana, and sheetrocked a 6,000 square foot church.
Oh my gosh!
And I mean, God's always given me the ability to work with my hands and do things, and so that was something I felt called to do, and I think I've been on over a dozen different missions trips now, and including one to Haiti with the youth back when Danica was in high school. So
Tori was on that trip too, right? Can you remember? I know she went.
No, I don't think Tori went on that one.
I know there were several y'all did, but I know she went to one of them. But that's
she might have went to one in Jamaica. I think they went to one in Jamaica either just before or just after.
Yeah, that sounds right. That's amazing. And then do you plan on doing any other mission trips in the future, near future?
Yeah, that's Mark and Carrie Rosner have kind of taken over that summer missions trip deal, and Esther and I have kind of partnered with them to be their number two.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They kind of line it all up, but we're there to help them manage the trip and do things. And so we kind of go every other year now. Yeah. And so we plan on, I don't know, it's one of them things, once you go, you kind of get hooked on them.
Oh, yes, definitely. I haven't been on a missions trip in a while. The last official one I went on that I can remember was I was a student in high school. And so it's time, it's due, And we recently, actually this past Sunday, this will post a few weeks after, but we had Dr. Jim Blessman talked about his ministry in Africa, and that may be something that I look into. Yeah. Because it was, and a lot of people, it was very, very well received. Yeah. I was very surprised with some of the people that said, I want to go. It's amazing.
Yeah, even Esther said she wanted to go too, and I'm like, well, I don't know. That's a lot of money, and that's a huge one.
That's a big one. Yeah, but I have, it's due. I'm due. I need to go on another one. Yeah. Me and Tori were very blessed. We went to Evangel, and we were part of a touring orchestra, as you know, and we toured all over the U.S., but we also were blessed to go to Canada, Europe, and then I was part of a jazz band that toured, and we went to Vietnam. I don't know if you knew that or not. No. And so I was really blessed to travel when I was in college, took advantage of that. Yeah. And I guess those would count as missions trips. Yeah. Of course, we're ministering, but I haven't been on a true missions trip where you're out working with your hands. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I haven't done that since I was in high school, because the ones we went on, we were ministering in churches, playing our instruments and stuff, which amazing. Like, so amazing. I love, just like you said, you have these abilities to work with your hands. Yeah. Well, my abilities are to play music and to be able to minister through that and, use the gifts God's given. It's just so amazing. But yeah, I'm due for another one. Yeah. And so.
Yeah. And I'm really tempted to go on that one. Blessman's too. I mean, of course, the farming part of it and stuff really speaks to me. And I love the way they make it sustainable. Yes. It's not just a go and do this thing and then it's over with, you go do street ministry to kids or whatever, and when you leave it's all over. Yeah. They're teaching people how to feed themselves and take care of themselves, and that's just speaks to me is that to what the saying is you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, and you teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. That's really what Blessman's is.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Kind of about
and
there.
so, yeah, I think we're going to have quite a number of people that are going to go, and I think that's awesome. And so, but yeah, so you've done missions trips, you're on the board, you've done that multiple times, you've served, and first of all, thank you for all that you do for our church. It's because of people like you that we're able to do what we do, you know. And so, but today we kind of wanted to dive into a testimony that you wanted to share. You and Esther, your wife, recently shared it in a video that Hannah King, our media director, captured, and we shared on a Sunday because we had a miracle month back in May. And you kind of shared that story, and we'll definitely visit that again because I'd love to hear more details and ask questions and stuff. But that was like a small snippet because we had to trim it down to fit in a Sunday because we've got worship, communion, and so that's why we asked you to do this. And thank you again for agreeing to do this to elaborate a little bit more. But can you take us through that testimony?
Yeah, and I guess it kind of started when I was elected to be on the board again. Mm-hmm. And when I got back on the board, and I think it was like in November or something, and Pastor Johnny shared his vision for the church coming up. He does this every year, and it just amazes me how God speaks to him and how he's so courageous about sharing these huge visions for our church. You know, that we think we can accomplish. And this time it was changing our name from Morningside Assembly to Restoration Church, and then planting and starting a counseling center, planting churches, and then paying off our debt.
Right.
Was the main things he had. Well, the first one that caught me was changing the name because I've been going here for 24 years.
Yeah.
I mean, Morningside is part of me. I mean, I feel connected to that. So at first it was a shock, like, you can't change my church's name.
Right. Yeah.
But then when I heard the vision behind it and the reasoning and the history of our church that goes along with us, then it's like, okay, I see. Yeah, this will be good.
Yep.
And so then in my morning prayer times and stuff, being on the board, I'm trying to align myself with the new vision then. And I'm thinking, okay, if we're going to be a restoration church, a place of hope and healing, wouldn't it be great to start this off with some huge miracles, like healings of some of the people in the church that are sick?
Yep.
And as I'm praying about this over a few weeks or whatever, and it's the miracles just aren't happening. And I'm thinking, well, how come, God? You know, why wouldn't you start this out for us with this? Well, then God spoke to me as the disciples went out and about and doing their preaching and stuff, they were sharing their testimonies, I'm assuming, as they're going out and about. And so by sharing their testimonies, the miracles came along with it. So we got to be willing to get out and share our testimonies. And in my mind, you know, Pastor Johnny and even you and Pastor Scott and Bill and all you pastors, when you get up and preach, you're sharing your testimonies from your personal lives. But us normal people out in the pews, it's like, yeah, but they're pastors. Of course they see the miracles. And so God's telling me is that me, the common person, needs to share my testimony too, to strengthen the faith of others, or however you want to say it, so they can say, well, gee, Tim had this miracle happen. You know, I can expect that for me too, you know, or some variation of it. So that's where it kind of started with me. Well, then is the January, I think it was, or February, I forget when, Johnny shared the vision casting for all of these new plans for the church. Well, then God changed it into the debt reduction part in my mind. And as Johnny shared the vision and then paying off $1.6 million in debt in a year seemed too much. So as a board, we decided, well, let's hold that for the next year in 2025. Well, Pastor Matt got up and said, well, but you never know. It might happen this year. Yeah. And then Leon Stevenson got up and started talking about thinking outside the box of how we can pay it down. Well, Esther and I didn't make it to that meeting, and we were home watching online, which is a great blessing for our church that, I forget something with farming or with the cows or something was going on, and we just couldn't make it. Yeah. But I got in the house in time to watch it, just in time to see that part of it. So there's one miracle right there is God made the timing come together so we could get in and Esther and I could watch that online. Yeah. So anyway, that weekend we were going down to see my daughter Danica. And on the way down there, I told Esther, I said, okay, I got a thought here. I feel like God's telling me this, that we'd been thinking about upgrading vehicles, that we just got her little Toyota car and we got 4 grandkids now. And if we ever had them all, we need something with a little more space to be able to haul our grandkids around and all the stuff that goes along with it and everything. And so we'd been talking about this for probably over a year already, and we'd been saving up money to help pay for the upgrade and put it with whatever the price of our little car would be, and to buy a SUV with 3 rows of seats and more room for car seats and all that. And so I said, well, if we're supposed to think outside the box, should we give this cash that we had stuck away for this new vehicle and give that towards the debt reduction? And Esther's like, well, yeah. And so we're talking about it on the way down and back, or, we can do the upgrade and sell the little car privately and give whatever we get for that or something. So we're just tossing around these ideas of what to think about, here to think outside the box. And so we went to Danica's and visited and come home. And on the way home, 9:00 at night on the farm, our mailbox is at the end of the driveway. So we pull up and get the mail out of the mailbox. And as we look at the mail, there's a envelope in there from a co-op. And so for a farmer, we deal with co-ops where you've got shares in the co-op and you get dividends and whatever from time to time. Well, this co-op that I dealt with for most of my farming life, that they went out of business. But yet we had these shares, and they would give us checks now and again for whatever it is they're selling off their property and their equipment and whatever. Well, we'd already got more than what we thought we should have had coming from all that settlement of the co-op, but they kept just enough of our shares so co-ops will deal with bigger co-ops to get feed and chemicals and stuff at better prices. So this co-op was part of a bigger one, and as they sell off, then they got to give it to this little co-op. And so evidently something like that must have happened, because we thought we were never going to see another penny from this co-op shares. And we got a check for just a little bit over what we'd had saved for our car. Whoa. That we were going to upgrade. And this was the biggest check we'd gotten from them, actually. So thinking they're paid off, and here we get the biggest check ever from them. And so we just both looked at each other and like, okay, that's the answer. This is what we give. It was like Abraham and Isaac.
I was about to bring that up.
Abraham's, raising the knife, about ready to,
I'm willing to
sacrifice his kid. And he says, stop, and here's a ram in the thicket.
Sometimes it's just the Lord saying if we're willing, you know. And, it's God sees time and things differently than we do. He's divine. He's God, And a lot of people always, relate blessings and God's provision to money, and it's not always money. Like Abraham's story, it wasn't a money thing. It was a sacrifice thing, Another example I think of was when we were moving here, I had this job, obviously, and Tori did not. And I had faith, and we both did, that she was going to get a job. But that was another thing that brought anxiety and stuff, the unknown, the unknown. And so Tori was looking into jobs, and she knew what she wanted. She wanted to teach elementary. That's her dream job. And those jobs just weren't opening up. And the first job, so she taught at a school where she taught kindergarten through 8th grade music. And Tori prefers to work with younger kids. She didn't like working with the, actually, she enjoyed it more than she thought, but she preferred to work with younger kids, right? I'm getting somewhere. Hang with me.
Yeah.
So she was looking online every day. We'd check Sioux City schools or surrounding towns. And the first job she saw that open was at one of the Heelan schools, one of the Catholic schools. And she goes, well, there is this one job, but it's K through 8, what I don't want to do. And I tried my best to not tell her what to do because it's her career, But she's like, let me go ahead and apply. Let me email the principal, send my resume. And she was willing to do that, even though it really wasn't what she wanted. And she applied, emailed the principal. And actually, now that I think of it, I don't think she ever heard back. But anyway, it was after she applied to that and was willing to do that this dream job opened up. Yeah. And I really believe it was the Lord's divine timing. I think the Lord saw that she was willing to do this and provided this. Again, it's not always a money thing. Yeah. But back to your story, you got that check, and you and Esther immediately said, this is what we're going to give. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then it went beyond that, is because then the next morning we get up and we're doing our devotions time.
Yep.
And I felt God telling me to make a 1 month's payment for the church's mortgage. So we were upping the amount to make that. And so in my mind, it was 1 month's payment, which being on the board, I knew what that was. And then I told Esther that and didn't say the amount yet. And then she said, okay, and I'm thinking God's telling me this. Well, the number she had is basically the mortgage payment for a month for the church.
Confirmation again.
And so, without talking about it ahead of time and planting a seed in Esther's mind, just like you weren't trying to tell Tori what to do for her job.
Yeah.
We both came up with the same number, and so we increased that to making 1 month's mortgage payment for the church is basically what we came up with. And so then after that happened, then I'm like, okay, I had to email Johnny and say, okay, put me on the agenda for the board meeting because I got something I need to tell you about this, our vision casting and the debt reduction and stuff. I didn't tell him any details. I just said, put me on the agenda. And so
that probably made him nervous.
I'm sure it did.
He doesn't like hearing, let me tell you something,
whether I'm coming in to say, hey, we can't pay the debt down, or, something negative or something. I mean, I'm sure that had to go through his mind, but
I'm sure it did.
But anyway, so then when it comes time, I basically told the board in a little shorter version of what I just told you, what we were thinking, and I had the cash in an envelope and tossed it across the table to Pastor Bill and said, here it is.
Wow.
And then, that started some conversation around the table, of course, and a couple of the other board members, must have been inspired by it, by God, by telling Esther and I to do this, and they made commitments, and then I think that's kind of where Miracle May Sunday came from, is that, hey, there's momentum here. Let's roll with it.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. So that's amazing. And I love that you and Esther prayed about it and you really considered it, I think it was Leon. He's spoken a few times to the congregation, once on the Vision Sunday and then on a Vision night on a Wednesday and then also on a Sunday. But he said something that I thought was so important. He was saying that, church, we're asking the Lord to do this, right? The Lord to provide, And he said, we don't want you to, suffer and go without food or go without a house payment. That's not how it works. And that's when he brought up think outside the box, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but this story that we shared inspired other board members. But since then, we've had church members that have also thought outside the box, correct?
Yep.
So we've had members sell things like motorcycles and what else? Other
Motorcycles, boats, guns,
items?
rings, jewelry.
Yeah.
I mean, and probably a ton of other things too. I mean, every Sunday since we started announcing this, Leon would say, "Yeah, somebody came to me with this," and
That's
somebody,
awesome.
So
That's amazing. Stuff that we have and possess that otherwise would just be collecting dust or not being used.
Yeah.
And selling it for His glory. And I'll share right now what Tori and I plan to do, thinking outside the box. And that's the other thing too. I think there's a negative connotation. Let's just be honest. Anytime a church or a pastor comes to the congregation and asks for money, whether it's for a funding project, even if it's a great cause like paying off the debt, and I want people listening to know that, and I believe the board is with this as well, that we're not here just to ask people for money. That's not what it is at all.
Yeah, you're right.
We're here to inspire people, to strengthen faith, and show that the Lord can provide.
Yeah.
Because this isn't our church, it's His church.
Yeah.
It's His house. And the Lord will take care of His house and His people. Yeah. And so I don't want people to think, board meetings are just, how can we get more money? It's not what it is at all, And I think there's like I said, a negative connotation to when a pastor stands up and says, hey, we need to pay off. I mean, $1 million, that's a lot of money. Like, some people can't even fathom how much that is. I'm one of them, But I believe, Pastor Johnny, and we have staff meetings every week as well with the pastors, and we discussed how daunting and intimidating this was, because to ask your congregation to give is one thing, but to give for this seems like a monstrous amount.
Yeah.
But again, we're putting our faith to the test and seeing how the Lord will come through. But anyway, back to me and Tori thinking outside the box. Leon kind of confirmed it. When we moved here, the only appliances we brought were a washer and dryer. And when we moved to this house, the lady left her washer and dryer. And so when we were installing ours and removing hers, I can't remember which is which, but one of our dryers was electric and the other was gas or something. And so long story short is we got to use our washer, but we're still using her dryer. So what I'm saying is we have an extra washer and dryer that's been sitting in our basement since we moved here. And I told Tori, because she said it too. She was actually was not here for Miracle Sunday, by the way. I was doing something else, but I was tuning in. And my wife, Tori, texted me. She said, is there a number the Lord's put on your heart for this, for what we're going to give? And the Lord actually did. And I texted her that number, and she was like, that was a quick response. And I said, let me explain. I said, I've been wanting to sell this washer and dryer for a while because we could use extra cash, or we could, pay towards this credit card or this debt or whatever. And I believe there's a reason why I waited so long, is because the Lord knew this was going to come around. Yeah. And so that is our outside the box story, is that we're going to, once that goes, that's what we're going to give, And it didn't, we're not going to go a month without food or gas or anything like that. Like, that's not what the Lord wants. The Lord doesn't want us to suffer for that, but he'll provide, and His timing is perfect timing. Yeah. And when Leon said that, in my spirit, I was like, okay, I know what we got to do. Yeah. And so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And timing too is that we still got our vehicle upgrade, as we shared in that little clip we made. And I mean, we'd been looking at this for over a year. At our local Chevy dealer, there was a couple of Buicks there we'd been looking at, but they were waiting for recall parts, and they're still waiting. Yeah, it's been over a year, and they haven't got these airbag recall parts, so they can't sell them. And so, we just kind of been, well, we really don't need to trade because her little car is perfectly
still
good.
Working,
I mean, got a lot of years left in it and whatever, and so we're just keep dragging our feet. And then once we made this decision, some friends from church here were selling theirs, a Ford, which, I've never driven a Ford before, so I guess, we had to change make a vehicle, but that's fine. It's a good vehicle. It's just what we were looking for. Right price range, everything. So, and from somebody we know that took really good care of it, because he's a mechanic, and I know he cares for it real well. And so we can trust this, rather than these that got recalls that, you know, the deal, you know, I don't know who owned them before and how they were cared for. So, you know, I really actually kind of feel we got a better vehicle.
Absolutely.
Just because of God's timing again.
Yeah.
So
God's timing is perfect timing. It may not be, and we've said this many times, it may not be what we want or our timing, but it's perfect. You know, that's amazing. So you still got the new vehicle that y'all were talking about all along. That's so amazing. Something came to mind that Pastor Johnny said from the I believe he said it from the pulpit. He was talking about, you know, all these giving stories and how there's momentum that we're trying to jump on and stuff. And I'm pretty sure he said this. And if he didn't, I don't know who it was. But he said it's not about equal amounts of giving. It's about equal sacrifice is what he said. Yeah. Pretty sure he said that. Yeah. What he meant by that was, you know, we have a lot of congregation members who the Lord has been very faithful to them, and they're very well off. You know, that's the best way I can put it. Yeah. And they're able to write checks for pretty good amounts because they're blessed. And Pastor Johnny was pointing out that the Lord understands if you cannot do that. Yeah. I cannot do that, for example. Okay, I cannot do that. But if I'm going to give this amount and it was this much sacrifice for me, you know, the Lord sees that. Our pastors go to a network council every year where all the Assemblies of God pastors gather once a year in the spring, and just a time of refreshment and networking, you know. And there's always a banquet for missions banquet, and it's churches that give a lot to missions, like Restoration Church. We're very much a missions minded church. We get together and they kind of review the wins, how much we've raised. They recognize top 10 churches and top all this stuff. And the missions director for the state of Iowa said something very similar to what I just reminded us of with Pastor Johnny. Is he went over all these amounts, and there was the biggest church. I think their annual giving for missions was like a little over $400,000, and then he went down the list, and then there was a smaller church that gave like $5,000, and he said the same thing. He's like, it's not about the amount; it's about the sacrifice. Yeah. He said that small church that gave $5,000, that was just as much of a sacrifice. Actually, he said that's probably more of a sacrifice than the big church that gave $400,000. Yeah. You know, so it's not about the amount. You know, it's about the heart. The Lord sees the heart. The Lord sees the intent. You know, and that's why I believe He rewards those who are obedient. You know, even though it may not be easy. And again, I like that you and Esther prayed about it and you talked about it. It wasn't like a very quick, all of a sudden decision. It's a really important thing. It's to further fulfill the kingdom, you know.
And it's not just the monetary giving either.
Exactly.
Because I'm not a person to get up in front of a crowd and speak.
Right.
I mean, this feels pretty comfortable here just talking with you. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about, okay, this is going to go out on YouTube or whatever. And so, I mean, in the back of my mind, it is a little...
Don't think about it.
Little out of the box for me to sit here and do this with you too.
Yeah.
And so back to the beginning of my testimony about God was telling me we got to give our testimonies.
Yep.
That's not easy for me to get up in front of the church and give my testimony.
Yep.
Giving it one-on-one like this is okay for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not a real outspoken person and things like that. So I think that's where God actually started it with me is I'm willing to do something like this to get my testimony out there.
Yep.
And I mean, and even that when I was praying about this and about giving my testimony, God told me, well, write it down.
Yep.
And so I just pulled out a blank sheet of paper and I wrote 18 miracles in my life that I can testify to. And I mean, there's more than that, even if, you know, as I'm thinking about it, there are other ones come up, but these were the, you know, quick off the top of my head that I can testify that I really feel like if it wasn't for God, these things wouldn't have happened or it would have turned out different.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's kind of where my testimony started with this whole deal was back to that and back to the restoration and the and the counseling center and planting churches and all that. So so I guess I don't know for people from our church or even people from other, it'll work for whatever church you're going to.
That's right.
Is if you're willing to step out and do what God's calling you, even if it's uncomfortable, or even if it's perfectly natural for you. You need to give your testimony and encourage people.
That's good. You never know who your story or testimony is going to encourage, and how closely it'll connect with them. So thank you for your obedience, and thank you for doing this. And I don't know what you're worried about. You're a natural. We'll have you back if that's okay. So, because you mentioned there's other miracles, and I'd love to dive into that. And that's what this platform is for, just more casual, laid back, and we're not as crushed with time. And we can go on, and then have people back, and it's just been great. But thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And again, sorry it took so long to get a date on the calendar.
No, I mean, it was more my fault than yours to get it. To on the calendar just because of springtime cabin season and everything going on, and and with all that's going on at church with the vision casting, we had a lot going on there too. So, which
before we go, is this not just a super exciting time to be on the board with all that God is doing? Name change, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, but we've actually, I don't know about the board, but actually it's y'all too. We knew about that a while ago. It's been in the works and in prayer, and I want people to know that too. That was also not a quick decision overnight. We're changing the name. We took time to pray about it, and Pastor Johnny took it to the board, and y'all discussed it. But and I remember when that was the main thing we were looking forward to, right? Oh, that's a big deal. But like you said, when we started, then all these other things came that the Lord revealed to Pastor Johnny, and it just gets me so excited. All of it, the debt reduction, the counseling center, the church planting. It's just what a time to be at Restoration Church, and what a time to be on the board, And so we're thankful for your leadership and what you do. I don't think many people realize that we have a church board or realize even what they do. But we're very thankful for a supportive board as well. Thank you for your support in all our ministries and what we do. Even what we do here. Thanks for this. This was something that me and Pastor Scott, it was kind of a dream, and so we're literally living the dream and spreading hope and healing in that process. So thank you so much for that. But Tim, thank you again for being obedient and sharing your testimony.
You're welcome.
Love to have you back. You're a natural. I don't know what you're nervous about. But thanks a lot, Tim.
Okay.
Really appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Yep.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow Restoration Podcast on Spotify and Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.